Where are you right now?
I'm actually in Mission Viejo, so it's about an hour south of LA. Super quiet, super family oriented. Not so busy and industry oriented as that city.
I used to live in San Diego, so I'm familiar a little bit, and I know what you mean. Part? I was in Hillcrest mostly, so like pretty close to downtown.
Okay. Nice. That's north of downtown, right? Like about 5-10 minutes. Pretty close.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's just like a chill. It's like the gay neighborhood, but it's very residential as well, and just so much calmer than LA.
Yeah, it's we used to live in Chula Vista.
Oh yeah.
And it's so funny comparing the two cities because it's like, and especially I think it's like also the way they drive. Right. I was talking about this with my friends, and I was like, the people in San Diego drive like they're baked all the time. like they're
yeah, I mean a lot of them are, to be fair.
It's kind of like the vibe of the whole city pretty much, but it's really nice, really relaxing.
You know who else is from Chula Vista? He doesn't live there anymore, but OK used to.
Oh, really?
I think he grew up in Chula Vista. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I know Brandon, he goes by Systems. I don't know if you heard his music before, but he was on Electromag a couple years ago. Also did a few Mousetrap releases, but he was like basically my neighbor. I don't know. I think he was like 5 minutes away from me, but I just never saw him down there.
Oh, interesting.
I'm such a recluse, I guess.
Are you from the area originally? Did you grow up around there?
No, I didn't grow up in Chula Vista. I am originally from here. Yeah, so I moved out there in 2021, and then I moved back here.
Okay, gotcha.
In Mission Viejo, yeah.
How was Mission Viejo as a place to grow up?
I want to say boring, but like kind of in a good way. Like there's no helicopters flying over your house all the time like you would get in LA, as I've heard from a few friends. It's safe for sure. Yeah, I think like this is pretty toned down enough for me. I think I would get pretty like strung out if I lived in LA, to be honest.
Well, and especially as a kid too, I always wonder, because we know so many adults who live in LA, but so many of them are transplants. I always wonder what it would be like to grow up there. It seems like that would be a very, I don't know, maybe it could be nice, but I could also just see it being such a unique kind of childhood, you know?
Oh, growing up in LA?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm just imagining it being so chaotic. Well, I guess some parts are okay, but yeah.
I mean, is that for you, like having a more quiet childhood, was that, because I think kids can go one of two ways. Either you get sort of over the quietness, frustrated with the quietness and want to like break out of it, want to go experience stuff. Some kids go get in trouble, whatever it is. And then other people, I think, use that quiet to kind of just dive into a passion or a hobby or an interest with maybe more intensity than if you're living in a super busy place.
I think like the way I think of it is like variety is definitely the spice of life. And I think people kind of naturally go towards that. So like if they've been living in a quiet place for a very long time, I've seen a few friends just break out as soon as they move somewhere else, and they're like partying all the time because they never got that at home, and vice versa. I've seen a few people who live in the city just, you know, go move to the middle of nowhere in nature and kind of embrace peace.
What was it for you, I guess, is the real question. Like when you were a kid there, did it just feel comfortable? Did you feel like you wanted to experience more?
That's funny because, you know, growing up in such a quiet neighborhood, I guess like did it turn me into a DJ? Now I'm partying for a living. I don't know. It's
the secret ingredient. Yeah.
Yeah. Secret ingredient is grow up in a very quiet city. I don't know. did it make me want to do? I mean, I don't know. I guess like things are like the way that I perceive things is so like everything is normalized to me. So I don't know if it like made me affect the things that I do today, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, has music always been a part of what you do? Were you musical at a young age?
A pretty young age. The older I get, the more I know who my grandpa was, because I guess he kind of took care of my piano lessons at a very young age. I don't remember how old I was. I was probably like 6 or something. But music was always around me. He played guitar. He was a singer. Apparently he did like vinyl mastering at Capitol Records.
Oh, cool.
And I had no idea. And I just thought that was like so cool. Like a skill set like that kind of like rained down on generations. And now I'm doing like mixing and mastering for some friends and clients as well. But in that sense, it's music has always been a part of my life. In middle school, I did orchestra. I played viola, was first, second chair for a couple of years. And then I kind of stopped at some point in high school, went into a garage band, and then forgot about music for a little bit. Did my degenerate years, came back to the computer, figured out FL Studio, and yeah, the rest is kind of history.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people who end up making, I don't want to pigeonhole your sound, but like something in the neighborhood of, electro house, something like that. I feel like a lot of people have somewhat of a classical background, people who are drawn to that. I don't know. Have you noticed that?
It's funny because a lot of my music friends have like metal backgrounds.
Well, yeah, there's that too. And especially like in bass music, I see that, the heavier side.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's like a rhyme or reason to it. I've seen a few friends that just kind of like go straight into it without any, I guess, conventional music experience.
Yeah, sometimes those are the most interesting, I think. I guess when I'm saying that, I wasn't trying to say that everybody has that background, but I feel like I know a few. I guess I'm mostly thinking about like a guy like Wolfgang Gardner or something like that, where you can tell there's such a deep, like actual musical underpinning to what he does. And I see that in what you do as well, where the song can be chaotic, the sound design can be super wild and out there, but I feel like a lot of it is the framework of it, I guess is what I'm saying, is still based in like more traditional musicality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think especially on topic of like Wolfgang Gardner, I feel like and I would love to know more about his background, because a lot of his melodies sound so Baroque.
Yeah.
Like so classical.
Yeah, it's it, man. So I talked to him on this podcast in the first year that I was doing this. So it's a long time ago now. And he was such a cool guy, such an interesting guy. And I actually wanted to ask you about this, because I think of him and I think of you, and I think of you both as like people who have sort of planted a flag for your sound. And I think it's such an identifiable thing. I think the people who love what you do really identify strongly with this sound that you've established for yourself. And I think he's sort of the same way. And when I first talked to him, now this is like almost 8 years ago, he was sort of in this mode where he was talking to me. He was like, I think I'm going to switch everything up. He's like, I think I'm over this sound that I'm known for. I want to do more of this kind of like funk, hip hop infused sound, which I think is kind of what he grew up on. But then I didn't talk to him after that for a while. And then by the time I sort of reconnected with him, I think he had sort of gone through a whole cycle of exploration and was kind of back to like the OG electro Wolfgang Gardner sound. And I don't know, for you, like, has there ever been a thought for you of that? Because you've been remarkably consistent with your output. I don't know, man. I love it because it feels like you've really been exploring and pushing your sound for a long time.
Thank you. Yeah. I think it's more like I see the project as as I'm very strict to the vision of the project as opposed to like me as a person. And what I mean by that is that if I were to make an alias just for me as a person, I'd probably put like a lot of genres out there. What I do is I have No Mana as an output for a very specific sound, and everything that I make in the studio of that sound, I'll just throw it on No Mana. So I guess in that sense, that's kind of like why a lot of people might think that I'm consistent with a sound. But I also have other aliases for other styles. Like I have Iska that I've been putting out like bass music, super experimental, sometimes trap. I've released on let's see, Hypnovision, very recent. But yeah, I actually started that project before No Mana. I've been releasing independently, and I've also been doing a bunch of like producing for other people, and it's and in that sense, I kind of have that producing side as an output for me to make those different styles of music, and it could be like hip hop, pop music, you name it.
That's cool, man. I have you done any of those like session work, that kind of thing that people would maybe know or maybe be surprised by that you were behind?
Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this because it's so recent.
Well, that's fine. We don't have to get you in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's good. Have you done that for a while, or is that a newer thing?
So I've actually started off ghost producing just so that we had some sort of initial investment starting out. I think this was in like 2014, 2015, like a year before I started No Mana. Once I kind of got the ball rolling with No Mana, it was just, all about myself, making my own music. Yeah, that was going on between like 2015 and then up until I guess like 8 months ago, I started putting up commissions and services just because I found a big liking towards working with other people remotely and helping them get their sounds better. And I think it's because the way that I work, I like taking things that already exist and making them sound better.
That's actually a really nice way to put it, because when you put it like that, I think it's so relatable. It's such a satisfying kind of not mechanical, but like almost like a tradesman. It's like a craft, right? To just take some materials. You've done this for so long. You have these skills. You're good at your craft. Like I kind of like the idea that you don't always have to be the visionary like rock star all the time. Like sometimes it can be like, no, like I'm the blacksmith at the iron, and today I made like a nice gauntlet, like,
yeah. I was talking about this with Julian. I think we're the kind of people that Julian Gray we kind of like being in the behind the curtains, I guess. In the music industry. And, as much as I love, traveling and DJing and, drinking on the job and whatnot, it's nice to, stay in the studio. I think I'm a studio rat at heart.
Have you always been that way? Like when you were a kid, when you started learning how to produce, was it the kind of thing you just sort of fell into?
I think it comes from just like really liking being on a computer, to be honest. And I like the idea of doing everything on it. I think like when I found out that I could do graphic design, illustration, music production, and finding out that I could do that on a computer, that just, now I just want to sit on an office chair for a living.
I love that, man. Yeah. There's something really nice in recognizing that too. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, this idea that like, we're always supposed to be progressing and improving ourselves and like bettering our lives and all that. But then, at least for me, as I've gotten older, I've realized there are at least certain parts of myself, certain inclinations I have that I'm like, there's certain parts of this, as long as I can kind of keep a narrow focus on this one little part of myself, I think it's actually fine and maybe good to lean into some of those quirks, rather than feeling,
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, like recognizing that you're like, oh no, I really like being on the computer, instead of sort of being like, well, but I need to balance this with other things and I need to make sure it's not out of control. It's like, well, no, let's figure out a way to make this sort of a productive and beneficial part of my, like, enriching part of my life, so that I can keep doing the thing that I already sort of liked guiltily,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I don't know if that connects for you. It's just something I've been thinking about for myself lately.
Like in terms of kind of, what's the word? Like finding activities and hobbies that are synergistic to what you do, I guess.
Yeah, and kind of like, how do I want to say this? Like, whatever your natural impulses are, whatever your inclinations are, the things you're drawn towards, like sort of trying to figure out a way to make those helpful, like a way to sort of flip it so it's beneficial to your life, rather than making it a thing where it is like a guilty habit or something that you tend to do but doesn't actually help you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally resonate with that, because I started doing pixel art like way before I was doing music, I think, or at least like music producing. I'm gonna guess like 7 years before. It was just like a little hobby, but like I think I was doing No Mana for about like 3-4 years without having any thought to put that pixel art onto the brand. And I just like, in terms of thinking about the synergy of that, I like to think about how random that is to have pixel art and producing EDM in the same boat.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because I see what you mean, but then at the same time, I think there's so many connections between, pixel art oftentimes coming from gaming. And I think there's strong connections between gaming and producing music. Let me ask you this, actually, because I was looking at some older interviews with you. And obviously, I was well aware of the pixel art thing, and you have such a strong aesthetic for the project. You correct me if this is wrong. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but you had said something to the effect that you were very influenced by like gaming and technology, but that you wouldn't necessarily consider yourself a gamer, quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still bronze in League of Legends, so I wouldn't say I just play it for fun. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like, I'm going to a gaming con every year or something like that. I'm inspired by them. I think I like the art of it visually, at least. Like a lot of Square Enix games, I'm a huge fan of Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy. I take a lot of inspiration from that. Just games with a lot of what do you call it? Like juice, with a lot of explosions and
sure,
and all that. Yeah, so I guess I could say I've taken a lot of inspiration from that to put onto my visuals.
Yeah, there's something to that, actually, that like that's the way in. It's not necessarily like playing the game is great, but it's actually like the aesthetic and the vibe of it, and how does this fit into the larger framework. I could see that being the same thing for your project. Like even your website looks like a game. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Oh, I love it.
I take a lot of pride and joy in that one.
I assume this is you like coding everything.
Yeah, I developed the website, put up all the servers, hosting, and CSS, HTML, JavaScript, all that stuff.
That's fun. Is that fun for you as well? Like that side of the tech?
It can be, and I think like for what it is now, it's as enjoyable as it can be. And what I mean by that is like I started trying to make my own game last year using like this like game development library. So I was like super hands-on in JavaScript, making game mechanics, and then obviously like animating the sprites myself and the sounds. And it was just such a pain in the ass. Like I forgot that I was doing music for a living.
That's funny. Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I think a lot, it's interesting because in the modern era, we're sort of told as DJs or even entertainers more broadly that you really do need to wear a lot of hats. It's good to know how to do all of these things and not to have to rely on someone else to do it for you, which is all true. But then you do run into that kind of thing where just a thing that seems like it should be a small task ends up taking, 2-3 weeks
Forever.
of your life. And it happens more often than people think, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. And yeah, I think that's kind of at the point. And this is a lesson that I'm learning too, is just trying to scale what you do and try and find people to help you. And that's hard for me because I like doing everything myself, obviously.
How have you found that? Have you learned anything, any wisdom of a good way to think about it or to do that? Because you're right, your project is so you, like for all the details, you can tell it's like one person like spending a lot of time on the little things. And I think especially when you're so involved with the little things, it's almost harder to let anyone else in. It
is hard, and definitely like a little, and it's definitely like at a psychological level, because everything that I make has to come from me. Everything that goes on my Instagram page, my website, I want people to feel like it came from me.
Well, there's something, I mean, that's a smart and a good inclination, because I think anyone who likes what you do, who follows you, whether it's your music, your website, your presence on social media, any of it, it does have a very unified voice, right? And I think that just as a lesson to anyone who's trying to do this is, I think it makes me as a listener feel so much more connected, because you can really tell that everything you're looking at is personal, and it's like a more direct connection to the person actually making the music than, say, some huge act where you can tell like they're sort of the faraway dot on the mountaintop, but then there's all this other stuff in between you and them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's tough, man. I mean, as the project has gotten bigger and more successful and busier, how has that evolved for you? Have you figured anything out as far as like letting other people in?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm in the middle of getting a business manager, so that's great. I can have someone handle that side of things, because that's something I've been stressing out on.
Yeah.
And other than that, it's just, obviously I can't take photos of myself, so I have to get a photographer, videographer to take some videos of me while I'm doing stupid things on stage, so I can post it on social media, etc. Yeah. What else? I used to have some people handle my social media, and they would make like a schedule, or they would make like a weekly schedule and figure out what to post on that week. They would handle ads too, but I just thought it was, even though that's not necessarily part of the art side, I think it was more like, nah, I'd rather like handle it myself. I don't know why it's not worth outsourcing.
Those can be expensive too. I mean, sometimes they are good, but it can be really pricey.
Yeah. But I think with now, like I'm thinking about it more now though, because I'm having this issue with trying to figure out Facebook's Meta Business Suite, and it's like way too many tabs. Like each developer made one, like each version of their own tab, and they're publicized in the interface, and it's just so annoying.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where I gotta like hire someone to do that for me, because it's making my heart race.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I don't know if you relate to this, but for me, there's part of like being a creative in any sense where like part of the fun is sort of what's coming up next, like a new thing to learn, staying ahead of whether it's the sound or the technology or the culture, trying to like be on that cutting edge. But then there's another part of it, at least for me, that gets very tiring of like, you stay in this game long enough and it's like, how many more platforms do I need to learn? How many more changes in social media do I need to adapt to? It could be anything, but there's a part of it I find very tiring after a while.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And especially like threads, that was cool for like 20 minutes. And then I realized, oh man, now I have to like handle another social media
Yeah.
account. But I think Instagram's doing pretty good about it. Like there's this new feature where you can, like every time you post on Instagram, it'll automatically post threads, which is great. That makes me a lot more like hands off. What's
Yeah.
another one? Yeah, it's tough.
Are you did you make the leap to TikTok? You doing that?
I have not been touching TikTok.
Yeah, I haven't
Because
either.
it's mostly Instagram for me. I believe in it too. Everyone has already been using Instagram, and when you put like the TikTok mechanics onto that platform, I think people will catch on a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe the Zoomers might think differently. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and that's always the equation too, not to get too in the weeds about social media platforms, but it's like, I think as an artist, people who have to engage with it for our work to some extent, every time a new one pops up, there's a bit of an internal calculation of like, do I really need this one? You know?
Yeah, I feel that.
It's fun though to like talking about to go back to what you were saying a second ago, hiring a photographer to, take pictures of you making funny faces on stage, all of that. It for some reason made me think of, I was watching a video of you and Garrett, you and IO, I think at EDC one year playing an art car together.
Nice, yeah. One of my favorite moments.
Oh, dude, it was so fun to watch that video because you guys you could tell how much fun you guys were having on stage. And I don't know how many people were there, that kind of thing. Like, I don't think for either of you, it was like the marquee performance for you that weekend. But you could tell both of you were just having such a great time, like goofing off, making jokes with each other on stage. More so than most videos of DJs, there was like a very fun, wholesome vibe to it.
Yeah.
It sounds like you remember that night pretty well.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember the most is there was a lot of wind going on in the festival. So they actually had to close the main stage, which was where our art car was kind of at.
Okay.
So they closed the main stage. Once that happened, everyone from the main stage kind of like exited, and I guess they like heard our music, which was kind of like the nearest thing to the main stage. And it was just like the most people I've ever seen at an art car performance.
And had you guys at that point been working together, playing some shows together for a while?
It was kind of sparse, but we definitely see each other more than a handful amount of times at shows. It's not. I don't think we've ever really done like tours together. I know he was touring a lot. There was another important show that we did together. It was the I did an Atmos show, Dolby Atmos show in Chicago, and he was on for support, which was like really weird to think about because Garrett ended up being so huge,
Yeah. Had he not passed when he did, I think sort of the sky was the limit. Like, I think he would have been much bigger now too.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, like where he could be now.
Yeah, it's sad, man. I mean, how did you meet him originally? I love talking about IO when I get the chance.
How did I meet him? Such a weird, like, I feel like he's been like in my life in some way or another, whether it's like he's playing a show as Fox, and maybe I said hi to him once and then just went on with our lives. I don't know. And then we just started talking on the internet, and we would see each other. I don't know, just like random LA shenanigans every once in a while. He was in like in the atmosphere, if you will.
Yeah.
But we haven't really like had went out to dinner at the time until he started the IO project. Started releasing on Mousetrap, and we hit each other up on Twitter. Did the VIP of some it was a knife party. Oh, Sleaze by Knife Party, and then we made Bad Things.
I guess this is a very broad question, but in general, when you think about Garrett, when you think about IO, what comes to mind? Like, are there certain memories or impressions of him?
When I think about him now, and especially after he passed, I think about the time we played some festival in somewhere in Florida. It was like in the middle of the swamps. Yeah, it was after that we were going to go to the airport, but we decided to meet up at TGI Fridays. Yeah, we had brunch there, and then we started getting into this like deep conversation, and that's kind of like when I found out he was pretty like philosophical. He went to school, studied all these things, and also like his whole philosophy on like everything matters and doesn't at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's some time like, and then after he passed, there are like some moments in my life where I'll experience the thing. I'm just like, hey, it's that relates to that thing that he said about, nothing matters and everything matters at the same time. I don't know. It's so subjective way of thinking about life.
I think that's kind of the key to everything. I've actually been saying this on the podcast a lot recently because it's a thing I've been thinking about. It's like one of my favorite things about DJing and about dance music is it's like the beauty of it is it's taking silliness very seriously, or if you want to flip it, it's like taking a very serious thing and trying to be silly about it. It's like it's kind of both energies at the same time. And I don't know, man, at least for me, that feels the most true to the human experience, where like a lot of things we go through in life, it's really all in how you look at it. It's either like the saddest thing in the world, or you could start laughing at it and all of a sudden it's the funniest thing in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess like the moral of that story is like, it all depends on how you receive that information, how you process that information, and what that is in actuality is just dependent on how people look at it, I guess.
Yeah, dude, 100%. I mean, I don't mean to, this might be a little bit of a reach, but it actually made me think about something I had written down here about the No Mana project, is that on social media, there's oftentimes like a humorous edge to it. There's, maybe some, I don't want to say like troll energy, but like troll adjacent, you're like a playful presence online. Do you ever think about how that balances with what is essentially like a really embarrassing thing to do, which is like making emotional music, like expressing your feelings through music? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then people come to the page and they're just like, wow, this guy's a troll. Like I played his song at my wedding and he's trolling about, a bunch of people flipping him off on stage.
Which but it's what we've been saying, right? Like, I think both of those things, like the fact that they both exist is why the project is great. You know what I mean?
Oh, like people can take what they want from it, I guess.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Or just that I think it makes it sort of more authentic to me, where it's like it is kind of both things. Like you do take what you do very seriously, but then also you realize that there's funny things about the work that you do,
Yeah. I think it's I don't think it's really something that I've thought about. And I think that's the great thing about it, is that I'm able to be myself with the No Mana project and put together things that don't make sense individually, like, pixel art, EDM, video games, talking shit on people on Twitter and making funny faces. Somehow it all makes sense. And that's kind of like, I don't know, I guess that's the aura I give. I guess that's what people will remember me by.
Do you care, just because you said that, do you think about being remembered? Do you think about legacy? It's another thing I love talking about, of like, what is an important legacy? Does a legacy even matter? How much do you think about it while you create music?
I haven't really thought about it. And I think I guess that would be my answer, because it's not something that I want to think about, because, as I'm doing things for No Mana, it's like everything that I'm doing is kind of in the moment, and it's about things that's coming from myself. I guess like in a way, it's just like being myself without thinking about how I'm going to look afterwards. I guess like that's a better way to live, I guess. If you live life honestly, people will just kind of see you for who you are. If they accept you, great. If they don't, who cares? I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling.
No. That makes total sense to me. I think it's a good philosophy of kind of just do your best. And if you do your best, then hopefully whatever happens after you will be the best it could be, right?
Yeah. Being the best at yourself, really. Yeah.
So let's talk about that idea through your new album here. You've got the new album, I Contain Flashing Images. How like thought out of a project is this? Is this you sort of sitting down every day working on music and just over time realizing that, oh, I've got a good body of work here, there's some cohesion? Or is it more, at one day you decide I'm going to make an album and then a bunch of intentional choices happening after that?
I think how this album came about was just having the feeling like it was time for another album. I just had this idea of pairing it with an AV set because the one that I did in 2021, it was the Gravity AV set that I did with Proximity. And seeing that doing really well, I felt like that was a really good thing to bring back again, but onto an album. And in terms of the music, it's just kind of gathering what I thought would make sense music-wise from songs that I made like 4 years ago up until I think the latest song that I made was with Feed Me Hopeless, and that one started around November, I think. But yeah, and I just kind of gathered music that I felt resonated with me in the moment. Like there's obviously I'm still pretty attached to like electro house and with the whole new wave with house music too. I wanted to add some of that in there. And then just kind of like later down the road or in the later stages of making the music, I kind of wanted to go through each track and make it sound, find out the rough edges to make it sound cohesive as an album and make it sound the way I want to make it. And then I guess the latter part of that was making the AV set, which took me about, I started in March, and that was the only thing that I was working on up until like early May. It was more like an audio visual work. It wasn't really like I had a clear theme or vision, and even the name itself, it's more about like it's pointing to the visual side of things.
Was that previous album, was that the first time you really thought about the visuals while you were making the album?
For this album, I think I was just making the music for the music itself. It wasn't really like I was making it with the idea of, oh, this kind of visual is going to be synchronized to that. I always thought of the visuals afterwards, after making the music. And my process was basically finish all the music first, and then afterwards I would, kind of animate frame by frame to the music.
March to May, man, that's a long time. If you were saying that's pretty much all you were doing, that's a serious chunk of time.
Yeah, it was like 35, 40 hour work weeks, basically.
Man. Have you taken it on the road yet? I know you got a bunch of dates coming up.
Yeah, this Friday will be the first for the tour.
How does that feel? Are you stoked? Are you nervous as far as just like executing the show?
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. I think for the first couple, it's going to be on the CDJs, but I definitely want to kind of elevate it a little bit. I just want to be more in control of the visuals, which is kind of like obvious because I consider myself a audio visual artist. So what I'm going to do is try and find out some system to do visuals on my end while I'm DJing, have it linked to the front of house and all that BS.
Do you still like going out on the road?
Yeah, I would say so. I think ideally though, it would be nice to not have to rely on like most of my income being on the road. So I've been trying to figure out other verticals. Like I've been doing a lot of like commission based stuff and finally selling merch. But yeah, it's nice to be on the road. Sometimes it sucks, sometimes it doesn't. So I think ideally I would want to reserve dates not as frequent. Like I think like what's ideal to me is maybe like once or twice a month for fairly larger shows, and the rest kind of, and like I said, I'm kind of a studio rat, so ideally I would do shows sparingly and then spend most of my time like in the studio making music and working on designs.
Touring too, I think, like we started off this conversation talking about your daily routine, and there's nothing more disruptive to a healthy routine than touring.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, at least they got gyms in the hotel.
Are you good about using them? I'm like, I go through phases where I'm really good, and then phases where I'm really bad.
I try. I think last year I was pretty good about it because I there was a 6-month period where I had this goal of needing to clock in a workout every single day until the end of the year. And that was just, I guess like psychologically it was like something that I had to do. It wasn't like, oh, I feel tired, I'm not going to do it. You know what I mean? It was just like, I got to clock in anything, whether it's like a walk, 15-minute yoga session or lifting weights.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes gamifying it that way can be super helpful. Have you figured out anything else? Again, I feel like I'm asking a bunch of broad questions, but in terms of, because you've been doing this for a while, it seems like you're really always thinking about ways to make it, sustainable and healthy and like still fun for yourself. Have you figured out over time, like any other ways just to keep yourself excited about what you're doing, to not have the annoying parts of the job drag you down?
I've thought about that, especially lately, because there was a time where when I started making music, it was like a song every 3 days, sometimes even one day. I'll just push out a song, and then I think in the last couple of years, I'll find myself not making a song. Well, I'll make a song once every like 4 or 5 months, and I just thought, it used to be so crazy. Like what happened? What was different? You know what I mean? And I guess like I was kind of in denial, like maybe I am actually in sort of a burnout. So I guess what I've been doing was, just finding other hobbies. I think the visual side definitely helped kind of refresh my mind a bit. And making the game, which was like a fun experience, even though I kind of went nowhere with that. And exercising, obviously. My friend Dane, he got me on a bike during COVID, and that definitely helped refresh my mind a lot, because in 2018, 2019, it was like 2 EPs every year, and then we released Secret Level, then tour off of it. So it was very like packed music for those 3 years, and luckily, good and bad, whatever that COVID thing was, that allowed me to like stay at home, refresh my brain a bit, and come back when the time was right. And in other terms, I guess like my approach is, and I'm still finding it out. Like I'll be in the studio for like 12 hours working on God knows what, when in reality I should be, spending a certain amount of hours exercising, a certain amount of hours cooking, a certain amount of hours, just spending time with my wife, playing video games and watching TV, and then getting back into it.
Yeah. And I think it's a constant rebalancing too. That's something I'm learning, at least for myself, that I always kind of trick myself into thinking that once I sort of figure out the perfect balance, or figure out the perfect, amount of hours to spend on music versus on podcasting versus at the gym versus my loved ones, whatever, like that, it'll just be set and I won't have to think about it. But I think what I'm learning as I get older is that you become a different person over time too. Like we all change as humans. And so it kind of just makes sense that like you're going to have different needs at different times to keep yourself fulfilled,
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, it's just, finding, it's just like different interests. Like I think like during COVID, it was like a new interest every month.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I was definitely browsing some interests there too. You talked about sort of the difference between when you were first starting making music and, you were making it was like falling out of you all these songs, versus now. When you look back to like who you were at the start of No Mana gets, signed to Mousetrap and really starts taking off. Do you think about that person, whoever you were at that time? Is that a totally different person? Do you feel like anything has really changed between like you as a person then and now, you as a creative then and now?
I guess one thing that was different is, I guess life in general just kind of got more complex and, just kind of focusing on other things. I think when I was in my early 20s, starting No Mana, music was like the only thing that I can think about. I would wake up. Sometimes I would not even eat and then just be in the studio making as much music as I can, and I didn't have a care, and it wasn't like I had to take care of anything, especially financially, that was like the only thing I could think about. And I think now it's like, I don't know what it is.
Well, it's just responsibilities come in, right? Like this, I talk about this constantly too, but I think at a certain point, it's sort of, instead of that initial excitement and not thinking about anything else because you don't have to think about anything else, then later on, it's almost trying to like reconnect to that old feeling, right? And trying to figure out like, okay, I am an older, responsible adult now, but there's some magic when I was like the dirty kid, and can I still connect to that? At least for me, I think about that all the time.
Yeah, I guess I see what you mean. Like, and part of it does have to do with like just finding out about music and then going face first into it, and I guess like after doing it for so long, there's only so many things I can learn. I'm not saying that I'm like hitting a wall right now. Like I'm definitely like finding ways to still be creative.
I guess maybe this is a more fun question to ask, is like, is there anything going on in current music scene, dance music or otherwise, that's like really exciting to you, that has gotten you fired up recently?
Yeah, I think when I saw Julian Gray yesterday, we were kind of talking about 10 years ago, that all the genres were kind of like, especially culture-wise, all the genres were kind of like separated. But I think that a lot of people nowadays, they just feel like they're more accepting of other genres. Like people who used to listen to dubstep are more accepting of house music and all that stuff. And opinion of that is, I saw Sub Focus at EDC. Oh, was that 2 weekends ago? This year's EDC in Vegas. And he played his new track with John Summit. And I just thought it was like an example of how genres are melding together nowadays. Maybe not. And I'm not talking about sonically, not at all. Like I still think like even in that song, like he had to make two separate sounding drops in one song to make it.
No,
work.
I know what you mean though. I mean, it is a big moment, especially I think for drum and bass. Drum and bass, I think, has been such a focused scene and sound, and still is, but like it's very interesting to see somebody on the level of Sub Focus really starting to play with it.
Yeah, it's crazy to see that happen. Like and watching John Summit too, just blow the fuck up. I think people either love or hate him, but it's cool to see him stepping into other styles of music.
Absolutely, and I think there's actually a connection again to something we were saying earlier about your project, which I think part of the reason John Summit has blown up as quickly and as big as he has, it's that authenticity thing. You can tell it's definitely him on his social media. He's being funny and kind of fucking around, and you can tell even at the high level that he's at. I think the people who are fans of him feel connected to him in a really personal way, and I think a lot of your fans would agree with that too.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely agree with that John Summit statement. He's pretty it's pretty unhinged.
Yeah. For better or for worse, it's definitely him. Well, man, I wanted to ask. This is not really connected to anything we were talking about, but just about the start of the No Mana project. Would you agree that it had like a relatively quick launch once you really started getting it out there? Because like looking at it on paper for me, it seems like you signed to Mousetrap pretty quickly and were like playing shows on a big level pretty quickly with Deadmau5 and all that.
Yeah, and that's funny because there was this trend on Twitter there, and they what they would do is they would post their career progress and write down like in less than 2 words a summary of each year of their progress. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to do one. And I ended up spending like an hour or two just like reflecting on how crazy this career was, because I started No Mana completely separate from Iska. Like no one put them together, so it's not like I could use that previous project for leverage for No Mana. So I started that project doing a bunch of my Up series, which was like 2 songs for free downloads every month, and then we went on to Mousetrap, and then something like 4 or 5 months later, I found myself playing on a 3K cap stage with Deadmau5 and a goat, and then that's like the craziest thing to me. Like Joel was like my top idol. That's kind of like why I started doing No Mana. But I just thought that was kind of crazy. Like, I started No Mana in summer of 2014, and the following year is like I'm already playing with Deadmau5. Already playing my first EDC. I can't remember if it was New York or Orlando, but yeah, a few festivals, and kind of crazy. I feel blessed, to be honest, lucky. I don't know how it happened. Went kind of fast.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at it now, do you think it was like a right time, right place thing? Do you think, can you put your finger on maybe something you were doing that other people weren't, or a way that you were standing out to get that kind of notice at that time?
I'm not exactly sure. I just thought making the music that Joel was making was easy, so I just started doing it, and then I somehow ended up on a festival stage because I was mimicking someone.
That's great. Well, I think what's hilarious about what you just said, I mean, a lot of people, I would say most people, start off by imitating the people they look up to, trying to make the sounds that they like. But I just like that you were like, yeah, making music like Deadmau5 was pretty easy. It's like, I think a lot of people did not find it so easy. Did you have like a connection with him early on? Did you like talk to him, have any kind of personal relationship?
I guess my connection was my ex-manager, Dylan, met Chris Johnson, who was the label manager of Mousetrap at the time. I think at some party, I can't remember. I don't know what he said to him, but I'm pretty sure he said something like, "Oh, I have a client that sounds exactly like Deadmau5. Please sign." Went from there, released a single, played the show, and that's the first time I met Joel, at least.
I'm always just curious, like early on, you know, like a new quote unquote artist hanging with like a really big person. Did you? Yeah, maybe not even from a conversation, but just like watching the way he operated or that his whole machine worked. Any like early lessons or wisdom you gleaned from that?
I probably should have, and I feel like that's what a lot of people would expect from me after something like that. I was, and I still am like a really huge fan of him. I wouldn't be like, "Hey Joel, can I come to your house?" But that actually did happen. I was stuck in Toronto. And I took him up on that offer. I was like, "Hey, like I don't have a hotel. Can I just like sleep on your downstairs bed?"
Nice.
Yeah, it's not weird to sleep on your idol's bedroom. That's totally not weird at all.
I read this randomly. I was looking at old interviews of yours, and I read this one. They were interviewing you while you were doing one of those shows with him. So it's like an early interview. And it wasn't the best writing, so I'm not sure I interpreted it correctly, but it sort of seemed like the interviewer figured out that this was like your first show, like halfway through the interview. And I was curious, like, is that when you started playing shows? Was like doing those runs with Deadmau5?
Yeah. So the show was in September 5th, 2015. And it wasn't like it was some rave themed. It was like a family friendly festival with carnival games and goats and animals and stuff. And then they just decided to have Dead playing. And that was my first show ever.
Wow.
I've never seen that many people in my entire life. And I come from, really growing up really hating like class presentations. Like I hated being in front of even 5 people. And yeah, there was no like primer up to it. It was just like, you're playing the show, do it. And who cares if you're nervous or not? Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that it's even weirder that it wasn't a rave or like a traditional dance event, because that's even less context for you coming into it of like, what should I do in this scenario?
Yeah. And that made me like, honestly, it made me a lot more nervous. And yeah, the fact that it wasn't a rave, the fact that my first show was with Dead and it's my first show are like 3 main reasons why I should have had a panic attack on that day.
How'd it go?
Really, really amazing. Yeah, I couldn't ask for a better first show.
Great. I mean, that's awesome, man. Was it the kind of thing where once you got that under your belt, it was a little less intimidating?
It took me a handful of shows, because everything after that was like, okay, now I have to get used to small club shows. Now I have to get used to like an actual festival.
Yeah.
So like all sorts of different venues, because the shows come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and colors. And it wasn't until like I don't know, after like my 50th show, I stopped. I got familiar with all the colors, shapes, and sizes to the point where I wasn't that nervous anymore.
It's just such a crazy first show experience. I think that's so the inverse of what most people's first show is like.
Yeah.
Well, man, we can wrap it up here in a minute. I wanted to ask just last thing on the new album. I mean, it's great. First of all, I want to make sure I say that. Like, it's just a great album and the music is great. For you, I'm always curious, do you feel like there is any kind of musical evolution? Did you do anything differently around this album, music-wise, production-wise, that you hadn't done before?
Production-wise, for sure. And I think there's 2 main points that I did with this album as opposed to my previous releases. One, I went through several pair of new monitors. And that's another thing that I do by myself. I mix and master my own music. So I've had these headphones. I've been using them. They're LCDX is absolutely fantastic. And for the longest time, I've also been using the HS7s, the Yamahas.
Sure. And
I just felt like, okay, now it's time to upgrade. I went to the Barefoot Footprints. Those sounded really amazing. They're really like fun to listen to, just for like EDM and stuff. Super bassy and boomy. But I decided I needed something that's more surgical, sterile, and flat. So I ended up getting a pair of the ATCs, SCM 25As.
Okay.
Wouldn't trade them for the world. And that's now I can, mixes. I can really like get my hand into like a really small bandwidth, like 0.1 decibel changes, etc. And the way that I master now, most of the tracks don't have a limiter. They don't have compression. I feel that it's best to like get the mix down sounding as good as it possibly can. Then all I got to do on the master is just gain it up to a desired amount of LUFS and mono the bass, cut the lows, and it's all good. And it's a product.
I mean, it's interesting to think about like the evolution of you in terms of your engineering and how that affects the music you write, or like the creative choices too. I mean, obviously mixing and mastering is also a creative art, but do you think that process of getting the new monitors, figuring out, the preferred way to mix and master, does that affect the choices you make at all while you're writing the songs?
Yeah, 100%. And especially the monitors. And that's something that you vibe to in the studio, and the monitors make a huge difference on, I think like when I was on the Footprints, I could really hear the lower end of the kicks and the snares. So I would make a lot of musical and creative decisions based on the punchiness of the kick and the snares. And yeah, I mix as I go. So the monitors definitely play a role in where I'm placing the sounds in the stereo field and in the spectrum.
Man, well, is there anything else we should say about the album, about the tour? Anything else on your mind you want to get out there before we wrap it up, man?
Usual, listen to my album, buy my merch, buy my tickets. Boom.
I like the metal logo merch that you made, by the way. That's great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I've been, as someone who has recently gotten into a lot of like death metal and black metal stuff, and now has bought some merch from those bands. I was like, yeah, that's pretty spot on. But dude, this was great. I really enjoyed this chat, man. I hope you had a good time, and thank you for doing it.
Yeah, I had a good time. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Yeah, you too. See ya.